Oh, yeah, I think it has started. Yeah, started. Okay, so we have seen till this point. So wherein, so we started with primary ledger. So then we created a business unit, and then the inventory organization. Okay, and then we created one item class, and we created one item with it. Okay, so all these prerequisites are completed. So the final one that we have is that supplier. Okay, so we'll just complete this supplier creation part. So I'll not go into deep because this supplier creation or the supplier data migration will be handled by finance team because they will import in terms of handling this, setting up the data migration strategy or having the data imported into the application. So all those activities will be handled by the finance team. Okay, so but to have the knowledge, so what we have it as a supplier creation screen, or how do we do the activity in terms of data migration? So we'll see. But this activity will be carried over by the functional, I mean the finance functionality.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so once the supplier creation is done, so then we are good with the prerequisites. So we can start with our procurement configuration. Okay, so now I'll go to procurement. Here it is here. Okay, so this is the place where we create suppliers. Okay, so now, so there are two, sorry, I think this does not have access. Let me give access. Okay, so this is first thing, that is giving access to this particular user. So now I have given access uh, to two roles basically. So one is buyer and the other one is supplier manager. Okay, so these are the two roles that we'll have to give access. So I'll just give the data access, and then we have something called procurement agent, so which is part of the procurement setup. So I'll just talk about that. So when we see the procurement related setups. So you just try to log out and log in once. Yeah, so now we have this access to create supplier. Okay, so this is the screen. So where we create the supplier. So let me call this ERT technologies. And here, if you see, so there are two things. So one is prospective and the other one is spend authorized. So now the prospective is something that it's kind of a negotiation which we are having with the supplier. So this supplier will not have the actual transaction in the system. So wherein we would have got this quotation or the quote from the supplier, but then we don't know exactly whether we are continuing business with this particular supplier. So at this point, what I will do is that so I'll create this particular supplier as prospective. So now spend authorized is the actual supplier who will have the transaction in the system. That is to create the purchase order and release the purchase order to the vendor. All those things that we can do it using this option called spend authorized. Okay.
Okay.
So now since we wanted to create a purchase order, so I'll use this supplier as spend authorized. Okay, so these are like the classification. So as a standard, we can select corporation and say create. Okay, so here if you see, so there are a lot of informations that we can see. So that is about the organization, so when it was started and the customer number and their website and additional information I want to capture. So all those things I can do, including my product and services and the way, I mean, the type of business that they are doing. Okay, all those things. So these are completely optional. So what we will look at it is that so the transaction tax. So if we are talking about India scenario, so which means our GST. So that is what we are referring to transaction details. Okay, sorry, transaction tax. So now here there are two things that we'll talk about. So one is the tax registration, and the other thing is that the applying this particular tax. So which means that tax classification code. So let's say I want to apply IGST 5%. So I can directly apply here. So which means if I select this particular supplier at my PO screen, so automatically tax will be calculated for IGST 5%. Okay, so this is kind of an option to default this tax and also for the withholding. So withholding is nothing but our TDS tax. Okay, so for these two, so this is the option that we have. And payment again, this is related to finance, so it is the payment method and the bank account. Okay, so now this is the one where we enter the supplier address. So if I just give add, and here I can just give the name. So let me select this as United States. Okay, so the style will get changed. Okay. Yeah, so that's about it. So the next one that we have is that creation of site and these things. So for this, I will need access, or I will need this particular setup to be completed, that is procurement agent, because the supplier creation, if I'm an implementation consultant, or if I'm an what do you call the, I mean, of course, the implementation consultant will not be able to create it, but if this implementation consultant is created as employee in the test environment I'm talking about, but in production, implementation consultant will act as a person who will do the setups or the configurations in the system. Okay. So now, if I want to probably create this supplier, or I wanted to allocate a person who will create this supplier, so I can do that. Okay. So now here, if you see, so this person can create suppliers, but if I want this person to create the supplier site and the assignment, so site here it is nothing but the address. So let's say I have office in Anna Nagar and my second office is in let's say Nandanam or somewhere in T Nagar. So now my address one will be in Anna Nagar, okay, so for which I'll have one site, and my site two would be T Nagar, so for which I'll have the second address, okay. So this is what we are referring to sites. So now the site assignment is nothing but I'm giving access to a particular business unit. So now the business unit that we created is Supremo. So now in the assignment screen, I'll give access to the Supremo unit. Okay. So that's what about the supplier. So we'll talk about this site and the assignment when we see the procurement related setups. Okay. So before we start our PO, that is purchase order.
Okay. So we talked about the GST thing, right? So if the supplier
Yeah.
is present in different states and
Yeah.
he is supplying the goods on belonging to the different verticals.
Correct.
So wherein the tax will be different, right? I mean the GST rates
Correct.
will be different.
Correct.
So for one supplier,
Yeah.
I'll be configuring only one supplier here. So where I can maintain these different GSTs for different verticals. Is it like I can create so many suppliers with the same name and
I mean the GST number or the tax rates.
tax rate?
Yeah, tax rate, we have separate module called Fusion Tax. So wherein we will create the regime, we will create the tax rates, and we will write a rule saying that if this is the location, I want this to be generated. But if at all
Uh,
I have a requirement wherein I will have to map it at my supplier level. So for that I'm saying, so there we have option at the profile. But usually, as a practice, we will write tax rules in order to generate this. Because here, if you see, so there will be a scenario so wherein I might have this GST tax as IGST, or I might have this as an EGST and SGST, which
yeah.
means if the customer and supplier has operation in the same state, which means that I'm going to generate CGST and SGST. So now the way that I will write rules is that, so if this is within the state, generate CGST and SGST. So I'll have to write two rules for totally I'll write three rules basically. So rule one and two will be same. Only the rate will change. So I'll give the same criteria as location, and I'll say generate CGST for this and generate SGST for this. So now I'll write the third rule saying that if location is different, generate IGST and I will give the IGST rate also. So this is how basically we will write rules, but if at all there is a requirement wherein this particular supplier is located in, let's say, Hyderabad, but the business unit that is being in operation is in Chennai. So now I know very well this is IGST. So for that scenario, we can attach it here. If not, we will have to handle it at the tax rules.
Tax rules, it's a part of again different module. Tax
Yeah, yeah, finance related to
finance.
finance. So
Okay.
we'll have that actually.
Okay. Fine. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that's about the supplier. So the next thing is that, so we'll start with the procurement configurations. So I'll start with the business functions. So I'll change the offering to procurement. Okay, so here the structure and the organization, that is structure meaning the chart of accounts, ledger, and all those things we have seen, even the business unit creation and assigning the business functions. So all these things we have seen. So including this item organization creation and this thing. Yeah, I think we have seen this also. Yeah, right. So now we have created these things. So I'll just directly go to this thing called the categories. So firstly, so what exactly is category or why do we use category is that, so category basically defines my item. So if you remember, so when we created this item, so with item class, so we basically assigned the existing categories from the list of value, but we did not create new categories. So we said that we will create when we see the procurement module, right? So so here
Yeah.
the first thing that I have is that this category. So now this defines what kind of item I'm actually trying to purchase, or probably I'm trying to do the transaction. Okay, so now for example, so let's say I am procuring this item as an raw material component. Okay, so now I wanted to classify this item. So let's say I am procuring this coconut oil, so for as an ingredient for my finished good. Okay, so now this coconut oil, maybe I can give a naming convention saying, so this is my item to be purchased, and under that I can have this as a raw material, and under the raw material, so probably I can have the sub classification. Okay, so now the way this will work is that, so this is the navigation, that is functional area catalog. So combination of these categories, we call it as a catalog. Okay, so whatever we are seeing here on the screen, so this is what I'm referring to, the catalog. Okay, so now this is not only used for this thing, what you call the item definition. So it is also used for other purposes. So for example, if you see here, so we have something called VAT recovery. So VAT recovery is completely the tax related information that we are capturing. So now, so why do I capture this VAT information? Or let's take again Indian scenario that I'm taking. Okay, so here if I wanted to generate my GST, so GST mandates that I will have to generate my taxation based on the HSN code. So now this HSN code will be linked with item. So now, as a standard feature, we will not have this option in Oracle. So what we will have to do is that, so we'll have to create something like this called as Hutchison classification. Okay. So now I will have this Hutchison code called 4521. Okay. So which might have some naming convention. So this is given by GST portal. So using that, we will create this. Okay, so now this 4561 will be associated with item 12345. Okay, so now using this, finance team will write the tax rules saying that if the adjacent code is matching, then this is the rate that system should generate. So they will write that rule. But for us, we should make sure that we have this adjacent codes that is created in the system, and also it is attached to the item. So why do I need this option? So why do we have to attach this to an item is that, so in tax module, they are writing a rule saying that if the adjacent code is matching, then I will have to generate this tax. But now in the transaction screen, that is in the procurement screen, purchase order screen, if I want to see this information as 4561, so I will have to give it my category and attach it to the item, because there is only one place that I can say that this is the adjacent code that is at my item. Because when I create this purchase order, so I will select my item. So the moment I select my item, automatically this category will be populated. So either I can display there or I can have it as a secondary category. But I will have to tag it with my item. So that is how we are generating this stat session. So for that purpose also we can use this catalog as the category basically. Okay. So now if
Okay.
I come down, so I will have the purchase catalog. So let me just take one, or let me take this one. Okay. So now if I expand here, I have basically, if you see here, so I have three items that is created. Okay, so probably if I want to create a fourth item, so I can just say add, and here I can give my own category. So let's say I call this as RM coconut oil. Okay, so this is the naming convention that I'm giving. Okay. So based on that, system will generate this category code. Okay. So this is what it will have it. So we will not be able to change this, or we will have to give something like an underscore or with the special character. So since I have given here the hyphen, so this is how system has read this information. Okay. So now here if you see the start date cannot be changed. So if I change this start date to let's say 25th of December, so it will not allow me to complete this basically. Okay, this is allowed. Let me pick some other category because usually it will not allow to backdate this category.
This basically based on the inventory, you'll have to come up with these categories and define it here. There are no standard categories here, but these are defined by the consultant
Yeah,
based on
so
inventory.
here the standard category is that we'll have this for the purchasing. Okay, so this is the standard one that we'll get as part of the product. But then if I want to have this breakup, that is these items to be added, so this I will have to input here.
Okay.
So let me just give this as 8945, and let me try to backdate this. Say okay. I'm not sure, but usually we'll have this restriction in the real-time instance. I have seen it, but somehow this is accepting even the backdated entries. Okay, yeah. So we have created one category called 8945. So now if I want to assign the item, which means that item has created already in the system. So if I want to assign it, so I can simply say here add, and then I can add the item. So I'll have my item number with me in the hand. So I can just search for the item and add the item, but we are not sure the exact item number, so I'll just uh, give something 10 and this. There is no. Okay, maybe we'll have to get the actual number, because if we know the actual item number, so we can give here, so which will give us the item. Okay, so we can just add to this particular category. So now this will be tagged automatically, or we will have to go to the screen where we created the item, and there in the category area, so we will have to attach it manually.
Right.
And this is nothing but the information about the category that we created. Okay, so just the information that we'll give in terms of this thing. Okay, and then if I want to manage my attachment to this particular category, so that I can add it here. Okay, so this is what the category is about. So once this category is created, so yeah, so the next item that we have it inside this is that okay, the supplier also we have seen it. We have something called procurement agent. Yeah, before that we have this business functions. So now if you click this option called requisition business function, okay, the one we took is Primo, I think. So this is the one that we took, that is Supremo US business unit. Okay, so now if you see here, so firstly on the left hand side, so we will have the default deliver to organization. So which means that if I'm placing this particular order, so where do I want to deliver the item that I'm looking for? So it could be in centralized place, because here, so there are two things that might happen. So there might be two requirements that we can talk about. So first thing is that the standard one, so wherein I will raise this requisition and this will go through the approval process. So once this is approved, so then I will have my purchase order created, or if I have this negotiation in place, that is RFQ, request for quotation, so then I will compare between supplier prices, and then I'll say that this is the code that I'm picking, and using that I'll create the purchase order, and then I'll receive the item. So now when we talk about this receiving of the item, so where do we exactly want to receive the item is what we are referring to, deliver to organization. Okay, so now I might be ordering for some other location also. So now the first scenario is that I want this particular item to be delivered to the location where I'm trying to create this requisition. Okay, so this is one scenario. And second scenario is that, so probably the requisition might have created from anywhere, but I don't want them to create the purchase order, because the requisition is internal document. But when we talk about the purchase order, it is not internal document, it is external document. The reason being, we are giving this, or we are releasing this purchase order to the vendor, but RFQ we are not releasing to the external party. So we are discussing internally, saying that I need so and so item on so and so date to this particular location. Okay, so now this will go through approval process and all those things are fine, because this is internal document. But now the purchase order is external document. Okay, so that is the reason they will want to have control at the purchase order. So the one such requirement that I got is that, so I wanted to basically create the requisition from any business operation office, but then the purchase order will be created only from the head office. Okay. So now for this particular scenario, the way that we will give the solution is that we have something called shared solution. So what exactly is the shared solution is that, so I can link or connect between two different business units, and I can say that this particular requisition can be created from anywhere, but the procurement or the purchase order screen will be accessible only to this particular unit called head office. So other business units that we have created is only for the purpose of requisition. Okay, so now uh, the way I will set up the system is that, so Here I'll say this is delivery location is so and so entity or so and so location. Okay. So now when it comes to the purchase order, so I will give access only to this particular unit. So we'll see how we do that. Okay. So for now, first we'll complete this requisition business unit. But in terms of solution, so option is the shared service is what we will use to achieve this particular requirement. Okay. So now I have selected this deliver to location, which means the plan B. Okay. So now here, these are basically the default options that we are giving here, but it's not that we will use only this option. So let's say I don't want to have this as an goods, so I wanted to have this as an fixed price services. So now here I'll give this as goods because my most of the transactions, if you see, it is basically the item or the inventory related transaction that I'm talking about. But there are some scenario wherein I will create the requisition for the services also. A requisition or the requisition to purchase order. So I might create the service lines also. So now I will override at my requisition transaction saying that this is not my goods line that I want to have. So this is basically the fixed price service. Okay. So that anyway I can override at my transaction. Okay. So now here we have something called one-time address. So so okay, since they have enabled
So,
it already.
Arun, sorry to interrupt you. So,
Sure.
kind of lost here. Like, this configuration screen is for what purpose? Like, what is defined here?
Yeah, so what we are doing here is that basically for the requisition. So requisition is nothing but the process of requesting for some item. So let's
Uh,
say I am having a person who joined with me today. So
yeah.
now I have handed over my laptop already, or this particular person is addition to the existing team that I'm having. So now what I will do is that so I'll request for either the desktop or the laptop. So
Mm,
I'll say that I want, let's say Dell laptop in quantity one, and I'll specify the model and the other information. Okay.
okay.
So now if I want to request this particular item, so I will need this configuration saying that what would be my default options in terms of creating the requisition. I will need to firstly specify what would be the location that I wanted to get this particular item delivered, and then I'll have to link my purchase order. If this is the requisition that I'm creating, so how I wanted to see my business unit created for my purchase order, because for here the requisition, if you see, so we have already selected this. Okay, but
Yeah.
then for the procurement, this is where we are selecting. So primarily, we are creating this particular configuration to enable business users to request the item.
Request the item for that particular view,
Yeah,
in that
particular
particular
view.
view.
Yeah, correct.
Supremo.
Yeah, Supremo. So if this particular employee is joining today, so probably I'll take another 2 days to give him the laptop or the desktop. So before that, I will have to request the item, so which will go through some approval process and these things. But if I want to request this item, I need to do certain setup in the system. So I will have to mention that for this particular business function, that is requisition, so these are the options. So I'll have to tell in the system that I will need approval for this, and this is the delivery location, and whether I'm going to create this as an goods, or how do I do it, or how do I create my distribution lines. So whether the approval can be overridden. So these are basically the controls in terms of requesting for an item.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So
So, Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Okay, so in this control, like we are defining what is the line type. Is it like goods and there were
yeah,
like some of the options as services,
yeah. Fixed price
like
goods, fixed
services.
price services, and hourly services, monthly services, goods or rate-based services. All those things we can create.
So when do we choose these? Like based on like what requirement from the customer? Like for example, rate-based services or three-way
Yeah.
match goods.
Three-way match codes. So this is not the standard one. So this
Okay.
is in test environment. So probably someone has created it, but first three we will not have it. So what we will have
Oh,
is that the fixed price goods, fixed price services,
okay.
general hourly services. So these things we will have, even the goods and the rate. So now when will I go for rate-based services is that so let's say I have my contractual employee so with me, okay. So
Hmm.
now this person will work based on hour, which means
Hmm.
for an hour I'll pay 500 rupees, 500
Hmm.
INR. So now I will say that this particular person has worked for, let's say, 40 hours in a week. So now
Hmm.
when I create this purchase order, so I'll say this is rate-based service, and I'll say this is the service that I'm getting from this particular person, and the quantity would be 40. Okay, and the rate is nothing but the price. So I'll say for an hour it is 500. So 40 into 500. So this is the amount that I'll be paying. So that is when I will use this option called rate based service. Okay. So the next one is goods. So goods, it is nothing but the inventory linked item. So if I have something in my inventory, so I'll select this as an goods. Okay. And again here if you see we have the general hourly services. So this might not have a rate, but I might consume specific hours, and as a whole I might give a price for this. So this is not specific to the rate, but this is also paid on hourly basis. So that's the difference. But mostly if you see, so these two are almost similar. So you'll not find more of a difference, but almost similar. But if I want to have it, so I have option to select either the general hourly services or rate based services. Okay. So similarly monthly. So monthly is something like for a rent payment. Because one of the project that we did, so usually we will not pay rent and the other things through purchase order. So rent payments are made as an manual invoice, so that will be created in the accounts payable module. So finance team will create the manual invoice and they will process the rent expenses on monthly basis. Okay, but there will be certain scenario wherein they will ask us to create this what do you call the requisition, and they will have to create the purchase order. We will not receive the item, but this will be two-way matching. So the two-way matching is nothing but we are matching this particular invoice against the purchase order. Okay, so now this will have only the purchase order up, which means that open and approved purchase order in the system. So using that, probably I'll create this amount for 12 months. So I'll say for a month it is 10,000 rupees, and in the quantity I will say this is for 12. 12 is the quantity that I'm going to select, and the unit of measure that I will be selecting here is that monthly. Okay, so this is how we will do. So accordingly, if you see, so we have this fixed price. So fixed price is nothing but this is the actual price. I mean, the price is not going to change. So that's the meaning of fixed price. So similarly for the services as well. So basically,
Okay.
these are the options. So even the test, it is created by someone, since this is the test environment. So they have created it. But from here, so till here, we will have it in the Oracle. If you are taking a fresh environment, it could be the test environment or the production or the development environment. So we'll have these items, but not the others.
Okay. So if the standard line types are not matching with our requirement, then we'll have to create these custom line types then.
Correct, correct.
And let's say like if you choose the rate-based services, you will get
Okay.
different options in the same screen to specify the rates hourly or whatever the options you said. Like where do you enter those? Like
No,
general hourly services and all those things.
I mean, hourly rates will not be able to enter it. So that's what I'm saying. So this is nothing but it's an option that I can select. But
Oh,
based on this selection, the other fields will not change. So
I
for
see.
example, if I take location, so if I change the country, the fields will change. But like that, so here if I change from goods to let's say fixed
Uh-huh.
price services, so it is not going to change. Or the hourly
Okay.
services, so it will not change. So
Okay.
we will change the unit of measure manually,
Mm.
saying that
Mm.
instead of each or the piece,
Mm.
so if it is goods, we will say whether it is each or goods or even the
Okay.
watts we can say. But for this manually, I'll have to change this as an R. Okay, so there again, I will have the same field that is quantity and price. So quantity in this case it would be 40 and price it would be 500. So it's the same screen. So it's only the line type that I can change.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
just to make user understand that what kind of transaction that we are doing. But this will not
Yeah.
have more or addition to what we have it in the standard form.
Okay.
Okay.
Next, you have group requisition import by item. So, what will be
Okay.
grouping like
Okay. So
category
this
by?
requisition import, so group requisition import is nothing but I am creating this requisition. So now I'm converting this requisition into purchase order. So how do I want to group this requisition? Let's say I have created 10 requisition today.
Mhm.
So now I have created probably for each I have two different item or three different items. So now if I say group by item, which means that for each item, system is going to generate this purchase order separately. But if
Oh,
I'm giving this by let's say supplier, so for each supplier, so it is going to create as one particular purchase order. So let's say I have created 10 or let's say 4 requisition in the system. So
mhm.
now this supplier gives me or delivers me 10 items. Okay. So
Okay.
each one of it I have created as separate requisition. Okay. Because I have finance department, I have IT, and then I have production. Okay. So finance has requested for some item and IT has requested for some item and
Mhm.
the production has requested for different item. So now
Mhm.
whether I wanted to create this particular requisition as one purchase order or I wanted to split it across different items is what we are trying to
Oh,
say here. So now if I select
okay.
supplier, it is going to create one purchase order for the 10 requisition. But now if I select item, it is going to create 10 different purchase orders.
Mhm. But
Okay.
is it not like the standard practice is like based on the supplier, the purchase orders should be created
Yeah, it is based on
group by
the suppliers basically, but I mean, since again it is test, right? So they have selected item. So probably someone might be testing something, so they have selected item, but usually it is the supplier that will select.
Okay. 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 Okay.
Yeah, so for now I'll just leave this option. Okay. Yeah, so this I think someone has enabled it. So it's saying this is mandatory. So I'll just enter some address, the default one.
Time addresses.
Yeah, so I'll select headquarters, that is Oracle Park. Okay, so then we have the approval parts. So now, if I'm making any changes, so whether the approval is required or not is what we are defining it here. So let's say, so here the change is nothing but it could be the item change, or it could be the price change, or it could be the quantity change. So whatever the change that I'm making, so whether I want the approval as an again the repeated process, whether I wanted to follow, or I
Mhm.
can leave this thing, because since I have already approved it, or the manager has already approved this particular requisition, I don't want this approval to be routed again, because there are certain cases where manager will come back and ask, so I have approved it already, so again why is it coming back to me? So there will be certain questions that will be asked. So for that
Mhm.
reason, if I want to enable the approval, if some companies ask for it, so we can enable this reapproval. So if it is not required, so we can leave this option. So I can deselect this. Okay. So that is the
Okay.
okay. Any question or?
So here you don't require BPM and all. It is managed internally.
Yeah,
Approval.
approval it is different. So rules we will have to write it. So this is enabling the approval. So even though I write rules there in
Okay.
the system, if I don't enable the option here, so system will not ask for the approval. So only when I
Okay.
enable this option, the next step is to check the approval flow. That is the BPM work list. So if
Okay.
there again I don't have this approval flow that is built in, so then again the system will this particular transaction will get stuck in the transaction console, saying that there is no approver for this particular transaction. But then since we have enabled the approval here, so it is going to say that we have already enabled this, but since there is no approver in the system, so this transaction or this purchase order or the requisition will get stuck. So I will have to resubmit it after I set my approval rules or the work list for the approval.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so the next one that we have is that, so create orders immediately after requisition input. So whether we wanted to create the orders automatically, so we can just enable this option, because mostly we'll use this option of processing the requisition. So now if I want to use the processing requisition, so I will need this option called create order immediately.
Okay.
Okay. So then the approval required for buyer modified lines. So again, the same thing what we are seeing on the line one. So this is
Mhm.
the buyer as modified line. So that is what it is. Okay. And then whether I want to override, because override is something that it will allow us to change the manager. Meaning, if I have two managers, so let's say I'm reporting to uh, my let's say the procurement manager, okay, and then there is an director for procurement. So now I have so my immediate manager is basically the procurement manager, okay. So on top of that, I also have my procurement head or the director for procurement, okay. So now, since this procurement manager is on leave, so I
Mhm.
might send this approval request to the what do you call the procurement director or head of procurement. So now
Mhm.
this approve override allows me to send this notification to different person, okay, which is in my same position hierarchy. So that is this option. So I can override this approval flow.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the next thing that we have is that enable supply availability details for the internal transfer. So internal transfer is something between the organization, that is inventory one to inventory two. If I want to transfer, so I can enable this. Okay, so which will tell me the supply availability details if I'm trying to transfer between the
Transfers.
organization. That is from
Okay.
inventory one to inventory two.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, and then these are like the additional information that we can capture. So I'm not sure we have it. Yeah, we don't have additional field. So now this additional information could be anything. So let's say I wanted to capture my contract number, so which is not the standard field in Oracle. So what I will do is that, so I'll create additional field saying the new DFF. I'll create it. Okay, so this will allow me to capture my contract number. Okay. So, okay, let me complete this requisition business function and then I'll show where do we create this descriptive flex field. Okay. So what are the information that we'll have to give and how do we create it? So we'll see that. Okay, and then the
Okay.
purchasing. So purchasing is nothing but the purchase order. So for which what would be the default business unit first thing, and then if I want to have the tolerance limit, that is that either it could be percentage or it could be amount. Okay. So similarly, so similar to the deliver location, so we have also the ship to location. Okay. So we can select the location and then if something is not fulfilled, so if I want to probably cancel it, so I can do it always. If I don't want it, so I can say never. So if I want to select it at the time of transaction, so I can say it is optionally. Okay. And then the multiple legal entities on order. So if the multiple legal entities are select, I mean, this will not be the case, but if at all there is a scenario, so then we will have to say this is an error transaction. Okay, so then accordingly, so we'll have to change the business unit and then we'll have to send it for the approval again. The same process will have to be followed. Okay. And then if I want to allow this requisition to the agreement, okay, so then I'll have to allow this option. So agreement is nothing but the blanket agreement. Okay, so we call it as an BPA. So which means that let's say I have an agreement for over 12 months. So it would be probably let's say $1 lakh. Okay. So now I will use this $1 lakh for a period of 12 months. Okay. So now I will have to release this particular blanket agreement. Okay. So I'll release, I'll have this as a release one, release two, and release three accordingly. Okay, so now after this release, so I will have to create my purchase order and then I'll have to process my invoice. So that is how the flow will take us through. So now if I want to use that flow, I'll have to enable here allow requisition to agreement. Okay, so that is the option of enabling this particular feature.
Okay.
Okay. So any question or I can move on?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just show on this one called DFF or the additional information that we will capture. Okay, so now if you see here, so if I say manage a descriptive flex field, so here I can select the module. So the module that we are working with, so this is a global screen wherein we can search for all the modules, almost all the modules. Okay. So I'll say this is for purchasing and I'll say search. Okay, so okay, I think okay, let me try to give this as PO maybe. Yeah, it is here. Okay, so now if I want to probably capture some information at the purchase order line information, so then this is the option that basically will select. Okay, or let's say I wanted to select at requisition. Okay, so let's say I wanted to capture at requisition headers. So now I'll just say this is editable. Okay, and here if you see, so there are two things that we can do. So one is that I can say context or I can say global. So what is the difference between two, or when do we use context and when do we use global is that? So context is something that if I select this value, so now let's say I am selecting this value. So I'm selecting this. Okay. So if I select this, if I want to have my second field, that is this, so then I can go for context. But I don't want to have it. So this is kind of an dependent value set which we saw when we created this chart of account. So we saw this dependent, right? So it's similar to dependent. Okay. So not exactly, but similar to that to understand. So now what exactly is this global is that? So global is something that I will select directly on the screen. So that is if this is the value set, so I'll select this value set only. So that is KK future value set. So I'll not select the other things. So that's about this field. Okay, so that is global. But if it is context, so I'll have to select it, and again I'll have to go back to the actual screen wherein I'll have to select the actual values. Okay, so we'll see how to use this. Okay, so for now, this is the option that we have in terms of having the DFF that is enabled for the transaction.
Okay. So maybe like when do we go with the context and global segments? Like what will be the scenario?
Yeah, so okay, I can give you
Maybe
an
like we'll have to create one fixed field and then we'll have to utilize so
okay,
that we
maybe
understand.
then we will see when we create a requisition. So we will
Yeah,
try to create. So what is the requirement that I had, so I'll just explain, and
yeah,
using that, I'll probably create one here, okay, and then we'll capture the information there in the requisition, and we'll see why do we go for global and why do we go for context. So we'll see two scenarios.
yeah.
Okay, so then we'll leave this one for now. So we'll complete the rest of the setups.
Is it procurement foundation in it?
Okay, so that is first thing, and the second thing is this one, procurement business function.
So around like based on that requisition business function
Yeah.
configuration will create requisitions. Is it?
Sorry, come again.
We created the requisition business function configuration, right?
Correct,
So
correct.
based on that configuration, we'll create some requisitions.
Yeah, correct, exactly.
Okay, okay. And now what we are doing?
So we are similar to requisition. So we are giving options for this thing. Uh, I mean the purchase order. So we have two transactions. So one is this requisition. So requisition is internal document. So I'll request for let's say 1,000 quantities of any item. So now this requisition I have approval from my manager. So now I'll send this to the purchasing department. So this
Mhm.
purchasing department will review this and they will release the purchase order to the supplier. So
Okay,
the one that we saw is just to request the item. So now what we are doing is to create the purchase order and release the purchase order to the supplier.
okay.
Okay, so here if you see, so you will have a lot of information to capture because requisition is nothing but just to request for item, but the purchase order is not like that because here will capture most of the information that is starting from the payment term and then if I'm doing foreign currency, which means that if I'm importing the goods from let's say US or some other country, so I will have the foreign exchange impact as also. So now considering that, so how do I handle this foreign currency transaction? All those things will be there. So now here if you see on the general, so you will have first thing as an payment term, which means so this is default one anyway when we are creating this purchase order, so we can override at the transaction level. So here I have given as immediate, but it's not always immediate. Probably supplier A would say I want it on immediate basis, but the supplier B will say that I might give 7 days credit period. So which means that if I purchase on 1st of December, so I can pay on 7th of December. Okay, so but it's not always uh, this supplier will have only this limit or this
Mm.
supplier will have only this particular lead days to make the payment. It depends on the item that we are procuring. So for
Okay.
that reason, so we will be able to select this particular payment terms when we are creating the purchase order. So this what we are giving here is nothing to default when I'm creating the purchase
Yeah.
order. Okay. So
Okay.
similarly, the shipping method. So shipping method is optional. So even the payment term is optional, but usually we will give it because if we don't give it, user will have to select it manually every time. So for that purpose, we will give the payment terms, but the shipping method is not mandatory. So if at all I'm importing it, so then I might need this shipping method. So through what basically I'm doing my shipping process. If that is the scenario, I can understand that. But for the normal scenario, it is not mandatory to have the shipping method. Okay.
Mhm.
And also the freight terms, again, this is basically based on the agreement that we have it with the supplier. So if I'm going to pay the freight or whether the supplier is going to pay the freight amount, so all those things are there. Because if I'm going to pay the freight fees, so I might have to create this as an separate transaction in the system because here there are two things that might happen. So if I'm going to pay to this particular freight provider, so it's not that this person will attach this copy to this particular purchase order because this item is sold by different party and this freight is handled by different party. So probably
Yeah.
let's say that DHL is giving us this service, that is freight is handled by DHL, but then the supply is made by, let's say, Amazon. Okay.
Mm.
So now Amazon is giving item to me, but this freight is being given by DHL. So now DHL it is not going to give me this for this particular purchase order. This is the freight that I'm charging, and for this particular purchase order number two, I'm charging this amount. So that will not happen. But how this freight charges will happen is that so they will have this monthly fee. So wherein they will say so for this particular quantity, so they will basically have this stock in quantity that is in weighing scale. So based on that, they will charge us. Okay. So on this particular date, so from this location to this location, so I have carried this much of goods. So for this, I'll charge this amount. So we will get this freight bills from the DHL. Okay. So this bill will be processed as a separate purchase order, and for this purchase order, we will have to make the payment. So that is how that will flow through. Okay. But
Okay.
as an option, if at all I'm importing it, so that is when this becomes crucial because there I'll have to specifically say that whether the freight will be given by vendor or I'm going to bear the freight charges. Okay. But for the normal term, this will not have much part.
Okay.
Okay. So similarly, so the all the three items, if you see, so it's meaningful only if I have this item that is imported from some. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the price break types, whether I wanted to have this as a cumulative or I don't want this as an cumulative. So probably I'll have this as a non-cumulative. Okay, which means whether I want to consolidate the amount or I don't want to consolidate. I wanted to have this as a line one, line two, line three. So that is the option.
Okay.
And then for this particular business unit, I can set one person as a default buyer, but anyway, using the login system will read this is the buyer that uh, is creating this particular purchase order. Let's say I'm creating four purchase order in a day. Okay, so there are three persons who will be creating the purchase order. So now system will detect purchase order one is created by person A and purchase order B is created by person B. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
system will tell us, but this information is just to populate there as a default value. Just for the purpose of population, we are giving the default buyer here.
Okay.
Okay. And then the inventory organization. Okay, so what is the inventory organization that is linked with Supremo US business unit? So that's what we have given. So the inventory organization, we created it. So that is what we will be attaching here. Okay. So in this case, we have selected operations. Okay, so the this line type is nothing but the same thing what we saw during our this thing, the previous setup requisition.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing. Okay, and then the
Okay.
currency. So what is the default currency that I want to have? So if I'm doing operation in India, this business unit, what we are referring to is Indian unit. So then I'll have to say this is currency is in INR. Okay. So basically, based on that, if I'm selecting different currency, so system will say this is a foreign currency transaction, and then I will have my difference in the currency. So basically, finance team will revalue at end of the period. Okay. So for that, it will be useful. So here I'll say this is my functional currency. So functional currency meaning my local currency. So since we have selected US business unit, it is USD is the functional currency.
Okay.
Okay. So now this rate. So now let's say today USD against INR is 80 rupees or 82 rupees. It is captured here in the conversion rate. So here I'll say if this is INR, if I'm selecting foreign currency as USD, so which means that this is the rate. If I select this particular currency for today's rate, today's date, so then this is the rate that system will calculate. So that is determined here in the conversion rate type. So again, this is basically the finance component. So we will just get the information from them and we will attach that particular rate type here. Okay.
Okay.
And then the preferred language. So whatever the language that we want to have, so we can select it. Okay. So in this case, it is American English is what we have selected. Okay. And then if we come down, so we have certain performance related information. So that is maximum file size that we can set. So it's not limited to 10. So basically, we know if I'm sending this particular purchase order to supplier, so what would be my file size that I'll be requiring to complete this process and then send this particular file to supplier. So that is what we are referring to maximum file size in MB. Okay, so that is 10
Okay.
MB is what we have given. So beyond this 10 MB, system will not generate the report. So now if I want to extend, I can extend my file size.
Mhm.
Okay. So then these are certain controls that is tolerance if I want to set for the receipt closure. So then I can say the tolerance of let's say 1%, 2%, I can set the percent here. Okay. And then here, if you see, so at what point I wanted to say that this receipt status is closed. So I want whether I wanted to say once I have accepted it, or after delivered, or after received. So receipt meaning, so once the receipt is created in the system, so then I'll say the status of the particular receipt is closed. When I say delivered, which means that I'll have to book the delivery in the system, so that is when the status of receipt will get changed to closed. Okay, so accepted is nothing but the inspection or the quality check, QC check. So once that report is done, so then only I'll say the status of receipt is closed. Okay, so that's about this option. So again, this is of tolerance. Okay, same thing. And the match level, so which we saw, three-way, two-way, and four-way, we have seen it. So that is matching with POR receipt are the different documents. So that's the same thing that we are having it here also. Okay. So then the other options that we have in terms of controls. Okay. So whether I'll be allowing the manual price update. So that is the first option. Okay. And then default promise date from the requested date. So if I have the request date in the requisition transaction, so whether I wanted to take that particular date to my promise date, so that is what we are referring to, promise date from requested date. Okay.
So this entire configuration, whatever we are doing, is for purchase order, right?
Yeah, purchase
Which we are
order.
sending it to suppliers.
Correct.
So the first option, like allow manual price update on fulfilled orders.
Correct.
So allow meaning like whatever once the purchase order is created, whether we
Yeah.
want to provide an option to the user to again update the price.
Yeah, so this will be created as an change order, but even if it
Yeah.
is a change order, so let's say initially I have negotiated for 100 rupees. So now supplier comes back to me and saying that this will be 1 or 2 rupees. So now since my purchase order says 100 rupees, and if this vendor gives me for let's say 1 or 2 rupees, the invoice that I'm getting from vendor which says that 1 or 2 rupees, then I will have to pay more. That is one thing. And Oracle has certain validations wherein it will check for the purchase order price and it will check for the price in the invoice. So now
Mm.
if it finds variation, it will put this particular invoice on hold. So for that reason, we will change this purchase order price there in the transaction itself. So
Mhm.
if I
That's
want
the
to allow
reason.
that particular change, I'll have to enable this option.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Default promise date from requested date.
Yeah. So this is from the requisition transaction. So if I want to default it from there, so I can enable this option.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, then the supplier holds. So these are all related to invoice somehow the supplier, because when we talk about hold, so we don't have this hold and the purchase order. It is in the invoice screen that we have. So in invoice we have a lot of holds that we have. So for example, if the line and the distribution is not matching, that will go on hold. So if there is no fund, it will go on hold. So similarly, there are a lot of holds. So if I want to enforce that, so I can enable this option.
Okay.
And then this is auto generate orders from the negotiation. That is from the RFQ. That is after the negotiation is awarded to a particular supplier. So if I want to generate the purchase orders automatically, so then I can enable this option.
Okay.
So if I want to do it manually in the system, so then I'll disable this option. Okay.
Okay.
And then if I want to override the approval, so then I'll have to enable this option. But if I don't want to override, so I'll just disable this option.
Mhm.
Okay. And so these are certain communications that we can do. That is, if at all there is any agreement or the purchase order that has changed. So if I want to communicate, so I can enable this option. So after enabling here, so I'll have to do the configurations in the BPM also, saying for your information. So there are two notifications. So for your information and for the action. So this will be for your information.
Okay.
Okay. And then on the right hand side, so we will have whether we wanted to automatically source to the contract. So that is the agreement. So that I can enable this option. If I want to convert my agreement from there, I want to convert it to the purchase order. So I can enable this option. So these are basically if I want to automatically do some process that I can enable this. So if you read, probably you will get most of the options. So automatically submit for approval, then auto generate orders, and
Mhm.
yeah. So then these are like a group requisition. So how we saw there in the what do you call in the requisition screen. So similarly here. So if I want to group the requisition, I can group it. If I don't
Okay.
want to group it, so for one requisition, I'll have one purchase order similar to that. Okay, so it's the same option, but we are having at the purchase order also. If at all I'm not giving at my requisition options, so I can give it here in the purchase order. Okay, so either one place I can use. And then use requested date, it is again the same option. Okay, so the requested date can be used as the need by date. So need by date is something that when I need this particular order to be delivered. Okay. And these are like the ship to organization and those location details. Okay. So this is nothing but the sourcing. So how am I basically getting this particular purchase order created? So let's say I am basically getting quotation from different parties,
Okay.
and using that, so I'll compare between two particular orders, and I'll say this is the best one that I can go for. So if I'm doing that particular comparison, then I can say RFQ and I can select the negotiation. Okay. And then I can say create the purchase order from there. Okay. So that I can do it. And also here we have the approvals. Okay. And again, these are again enabling the approvals for negotiation award. So award is nothing but giving this order to one supplier. Okay, so that is the award. So similarly, so we'll have enabling these options. Okay. So what else we have? Display best price. So these are like blind negotiations. So wherein we will not give the what do you call the quantity in the requisition. So for those items, if I want to enable, so usually will not enable because we will need the exact items or the details in the requisition. Okay, so not enable, but as an option we have this. Okay. And then if I want to have this requisition or the sorry, not the requisition, the negotiation, that is RFQ process involved always. So then I can say invite only sourcing eligible suppliers. Okay. So primarily these are the options that we will be having in terms of procurement business functions. Okay. Okay, so this is nothing but the additional information that we can see. So here if you see, so for auction, so what would be the layout that we'll be using? So these are the standard ones that is given by Oracle. Okay, so if I want to probably change this, so I can change this. So that's about the document types. Okay, and this is about the procurement business function. Okay. So So this is clear, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I mean it's almost more than 11, so we'll connect tomorrow.